Good morning. How y'all doing? All right, it's so good to see you guys. I have to give you guys applause because the response for this program has exceeded all expectations. We had 125 people registered, so we had to cut it off because we have enough room. So I just want to say thank you guys so much for spending part of your Saturday with us, or all of your Saturday with us. So as Robin said, my name is Tamika Strong. I am the current president of GGS, but I also wear the hat of reference archivist here at the Georgia Archives. And so I'm going to put on my GGS hat right now. It's our anniversary. Today is the kickoff for the celebration of 60 years of service to the genealogical community in Georgia for GGS. So I'm so excited because 60 years is a long time. Some organizations don't get to see 60 years. And so on April 17th, 1964, yes, we're a little late, but hey, we're going to have a whole year to celebrate. Our organization, the Georgia Genealogical Society Incorporated, was incorporated here in the state of Georgia. And our mission is to raise the standards of genealogical research over the state through educational programs, workshops, and the publication of genealogical data, to constitute a Friends of Archives group for the Georgia Department of Archives and History, assisting said department in building up its genealogical collection, and to promote the collecting and preservation of the early records of the colony and state of Georgia. So over the course of 60 years, I think we've done that. And so one thing I wanted to do before I even get into the appreciation for our forefathers is I want to thank the Georgia Archives, as well as the current state archivist, Mr. Chris Davidson, for all his support. Thank Robin, who has stepped out, for all of her hard work with relation to this program. And I also want to pay homage to those who came before us. So if you have participated in some form of fashion in GGS over the course of the past 60 years, please stand or raise your hand. Oh, wow. Let's give them applause. Because these individuals are the shoulders that we currently stand on. And so if you are a part of the 2024-2025 GGS board, will you please stand? I see at least 3 of us. And some of us are downstairs working. So thank you guys for all of your hard work, for all that you do for GGS, and for all the things we are going to do. So keep your eyes peeled for upcoming events. We have an upcoming members only event, June 29th. It's going to be virtual. So hopefully if you are a member, you will join us. If you are not currently a member, you will join the organization so that you can participate, because we're going to have a lot of fun things happening. Also visit our table downstairs to learn about some upcoming programs, our free webinars. We know you have a lot, but our free webinars are focused on genealogy research in Georgia. So the next one is July 11th, Prepping for Courthouse Research in Georgia. So that's on a Thursday at 8 p.m. So make sure you join us for that. And so I have the illustrious pleasure of introducing our speaker, who has long been a contributor of information about Georgia. And so I told somebody the other day, I was like, Bob Davis has probably forgotten more about Georgia than I know. He's been doing so much work, and he is someone who I aspire to be, to follow in his footsteps. So Bob Davis has researched Georgia genealogy, history, and records since 1974. Aging myself, he has been doing this longer than I have been alive. So thank you for that. He has more than 2,000 publications, including more than 40 books that include the first guide to Georgia research. Mr. Davis has spoken at hundreds of meetings, received several awards, and has made television appearances throughout his career. So just a note, the raffle prize is one of his books. So make sure you get your ticket, okay? So without further ado, I give you Mr. Bob Davis.
Hello.
So we got I think it's an hour.
Okay.
So where are we now? Okay. So yeah, we'll in at 10:36. Okay?
Okay, very good, very good. All right, everybody. First things first. there are handouts that come with this program, and the handouts will give you all the book citations, all the basic information. This way I can entertain you with my standout instead of you being busy scribbling down obscure citations or something. All right. Okay. You are fortunate if you are researching in Georgia. I can't tell you how fortunate you are. You have to have done a lot of South Carolina research to really appreciate Georgia, but or a lot of other places I could mention where the records are somewhat lacking, the libraries are somewhat lacking, and whatever, as this goes. But the thing is, with us Georgians, the only thing we like creating more than red tape is little Georgians. Okay. So we have many great libraries and many great sources. Georgia has more than 100 archives and special collections, more than 100. And I'm really being unfair. It's probably closer to 200. We have over 150 public libraries that have special collections rooms, over 150 of those libraries. And overall, we have over 600 archives, cultural centers, libraries, museums, etc. And you can go on the internet and get lists of these organizations. But the best way to find out the libraries, museums, archives that you need to contact is to contact the public libraries in the counties where your family came from and ask them for advice. I can't say enough good things about research librarians. And such librarians literally know where the bodies are buried, especially in Fort Payne, Alabama, where the city public library is in the city cemetery. And they can take you out on the porch and actually show you where Grandpa is these days. All right. Okay, now when searching for records in a county, which is where you should start, always understand how the county was created and what was created from the county. For example, you're thinking, well, I'll give you a good example from my own family. I finally had a breakthrough. My Rogers family has been trying to find a breakthrough for over 50 years. And I came this close to it, because I found out that we were actually from Moore County, North Carolina. And then I realized Moore County lost all of its records in a fire, which was terrible, except that Moore County was created from Cumberland County. And all the records that really mattered in my Rogers research were in Cumberland County, which still has every scrap of paper that county has had since the beginning of writing. And of course, that brought the big breakthrough on my Rogers family. So like I say, know from where your county was created and what was created from your county. There's actually a place near Warrenton, Georgia, where these poor people changed counties 4 times in 20 years without moving because the county boundaries were changed. And of course, that makes research there, that makes research there a particular challenge, like getting into this chair. Okay. Yeah, I know what you mean. All right. Okay. Now, as this is now, but Georgia, now just everything I just said is particularly true of Georgia, but throw into that that we have our own Georgia peculiarities. As one person famously said about Georgia's governor, Eugene Talmadge, when we Georgians are Georgian, we're Georgian as bleep. And so we put our own particular weird spin on things. In Georgia, there are more than 30 Georgia counties that have names that they share with 30 Georgia towns that are not in those respective counties. For example, most famous example of this is the city of Macon, which is in Bibb County, not 100 miles from there in Macon County, the subject of all those B-class movies. Okay, nothing against Macon County, Georgia. But anyway, so understand that can be a problem too. Do not hesitate to check counties across the state line. State lines never meant anything to your ancestors. They should not mean anything to you, unless, of course, you're wanted for something, but that's as it goes. Around Georgia, there are many great libraries that also should not be overlooked. Southern history of the Birmingham Public Library is one of the greatest centers for Southern research that has ever been or ever will be, and it's in Birmingham. It's in Birmingham. The famous Research Triangle in Raleigh, North Carolina, a great place for researching your family. The McClung Collection in Knoxville, Tennessee, will help you reach that inner hillbilly of yours. And you win the McClung Collection, which is open 7 days a week, is so wonderful. You wish there was a McClung Collection everywhere in this country. It's just out of this world. Of course, South Carolina has many great libraries, but they all only concentrate on South Carolina. Never go to South Carolina to do research unless you're researching South Carolinians, period. But then again, South Carolina, they say, who else would you want to research? The Alabama Department of Archives and History is also very good. And we're only a couple of days' drive from the many great libraries in Washington, D.C., and from the Allen County Fort Wayne Library, which is the second greatest genealogical library in the world, only after the library at Salt Lake. All right, now, when we think of going to a library, we usually don't think of some grand library like Fort Wayne or the Southern history of the Birmingham Public Library, but we think of more of going to a county library like the Washington Memorial Library in Macon, as an example. Okay, that. Now, always check the website of a library before you visit the library. They may have all sorts of wonderful things on the internet, and libraries are all different in that regard. Even little local rural libraries have spectacular things on the internet you wouldn't expect to find that can help you do a lot of work on your family without leaving the comfort of your easy chair. Okay. And also do your homework, preparedness. Free websites like Family Search, Google, WorldCat, Archive Grid, Gestor, and Amazon can help lead you to books and other materials on your family and where they're being kept. And one of the handouts has all of these in it for you, listed for you. And of course, we all know the fine subscription sites like Ancestry and Fold3. But rather than subscribe to them, you might find out that your own local public library already has a subscription to them and will let you access them there free at your local public library. All right. Always check with a public library before you make a trip to that respective county. Always check with the public library. And particularly if you're planning to visit the public library and check out its resources. But you do this to find out what days they're going to be open and what hours they're open. I know personally the heartbreak of standing in front of the doors of the Hargret Library at the University of Georgia, banging, crying to be let in. And they were closed for a football game. Okay. It is really sad and pathetic. I mean, not the library, maybe me. But anyway, have that. Also, explain to the librarians your research interest and problems. Yes, you will bore them to tears, but they've been bored to tears from such stories for years. And that's what they're paid to do, is listening to your sad story and helping you any way that they can. And I know what it is like to contact the public library and say, I'm looking for an obscure missing ancestor of mine named so-and-so. And they write back, email you back and say, you mean my great-grandfather? And here's my Aunt Clara's email address. And she's been researching the family. She knew him personally, and she's been researching the family since ancient times. I've seen that happen. Like I said, the librarians know where the bodies are buried and who's digging them up. Okay, as this goes. And many of these public libraries have family histories and even unpublished manuscripts that are found nowhere else. In the very building you are sitting in, there is a published history of the family of Georgia Governor Joseph E. Brown, a distant cousin of mine. And for whatever reason, I don't understand this, apparently this is the only copy of that family history in the world. How it was published and only one library has a copy, I have no idea. Oh, and by the way, just because I said it's the only copy, don't take it home. Leave it here at the archives for the rest of us. So, and of course, that encourages you to check the book catalog of the library before you visit it to see what they have. Most libraries have their books on a source called WorldCat, which is a free website, which tells you which libraries have what books. Some Georgia libraries use, instead of using WorldCat, use Pines, P-I-N-E-S. And that's important to know. Now, by the way, the things I'm telling you right at the moment about libraries apply to anywhere, not just Georgia. But we here in Georgia love to have you come visit. We love tourists unless they're affiliated with the federal forces of General William Tecumseh Sherman. There we may look on with askance. But as an old saying here in Georgia, a tourist is worth more than a bale of cotton, and sure is a whole lot easier to pick. All right. Now, other things. Be sure to understand if there's special rules and such about libraries. And this is particularly true of archives, but libraries as well. There are many archives and a few libraries which keep materials off-site, and you have to actually order the materials before you can see them. The Atlanta History Center, the Keenan Research Center, even the books on the shelves, you have to order them in advance and have them waiting for you before you're allowed to look at them. Duke University, their Rubenstein libraries that way as well. And the National Archives in Washington, D.C., well, even the National Archives at Atlanta across the parking lot from us. It's really a good idea to contact them ahead of time to make sure your materials are going to be waiting for you. Or if you're going to the National Archives in Washington, you have to when you show up, you have to fill out a slip and order the records, and the records will be pulled for you. But there's rules like that, and many places have peculiar rules to it. For example, the search room of the National Archives in Washington does not allow you to wear anything that zips up front. They also do not allow you to sit in the search room with just your T-shirt on. I know from personal experience. Okay. Now, when you set out for your research trip, there are 5 P's that you must remember. Okay. Okay, we've talked about asking for the rules. Okay, this, by the way, is the search room of the Southern History at Birmingham Public Library. Okay. Do I have my... Well, I don't seem to have put that down. But anyway, the 5 are in your handout. They are preparedness, professionalism, politeness, patience, and persistence. Note me, in the old days, we used to refer to the genealogist who researched 5 ancestors in 30 minutes between buses. No, only go to a library if you can afford to spend the time it takes to get what you are there for. Oh, and an important rule about the National Archives: never go to a National Archives, either the one across the parking lot or the one in Washington, unless you specifically know what you are going there for. And there are 2 excellent books on the National Archives in Washington on their record. One is A Guide to Genealogical Research at the National Archives, and the other is Guide to Federal Records in the National Archives, and these will be in your handout. But federal archives are user unfriendly. And so, like you say, don't go there unless you know what you want and you've checked to make sure that it's going to be there when you arrive. Okay, persistence, and that is never give up. Although sometimes you might want to put something aside and wait until you've got more information or luck is on your side. I always taught my genealogy students that there are some days you could blindfold me, spin me around in a library, and whatever book I pulled off the shelf would answer your question. There are other days when I couldn't find the floor underneath me if I was laying face down on it. And the same will happen to you in your research. But anyway, be prepared. But even persistence can be taken too far. think of the professor who spent 50 years proving that the Odyssey and the Iliad were written by not by one man, but by two different Homers, both of whom were blind poets who lived in Greece at the same time. Like that makes a difference, you know. Or as W.C. Fields famously teaches us, if you don't at first succeed, you can try again, but then quit. No sense continuing to make a fool of yourself. Well, keep your material handy. That's why, even though I've published a lot of things, when I find something new, I've kept the electronic copies on my computer and I add to the electronic copies and such, not just for future publications, but to keep all my information best where I can get it. But as I say, be patient and be prepared. Okay, more and more I'm inclined to stay at a motel that is closest to the archives of the library I want to go to. Nothing wrong with being within walking distance of the archives of the library. Of course, that depends on what city the archives of the library might be in. As a general rule, I tend to stick with one chain and be a member of their members program so I can get rewards and bonuses and things like that. Think about flying or taking the train, although sometimes it's worthwhile to bring your car just so you can get around and see things locally. Check for the days closed, although this is very hard to do in some institutions. Many years ago, the R.J. Taylor Foundation sent me to Great Britain looking for Georgia's colonial records. And I'd written ahead and everything with the archives of London. And when I showed up, they were closed for their annual weekly, let's go find everything that's missing week. And whoever had answered my letter had never bothered to mention that. Fortunately, I still had plenty of time to come back and get good things that way. Okay. Okay, bring your own pencils, carry change, bring a credit card. And I like to carry a credit card with me and you can buy these at Walgreens and Walmart and places like that. I bring a credit card with me which has a specific sum of money on it. This is to cover the room and expenses and things like that. This way, if somebody gets my credit card information, they later try to access it, there won't be anything on it for them to steal. Just a thought, and even if you're not going on a research trip, that's a good thing to keep in mind. Also, it might be the way that you order things online as well, in order to protect your credit card information. Okay, I also not only bring pencils, but bring your own pencil sharpener. One of those little simple ones would be fine. I've been to the National Archives of the United Kingdom of Great Britain. You come in there, well, I'm sorry, ma'am, but here we only use pencils, don't you know? Okay, fine. Do you have a pencil I can borrow? Certainly. Here's a number 1 from, in fact, I think we've still got them left over from Alfred the Great. And okay, do you have a pencil sharpener? Well, we had one the other day, I know. And anyway, number 1 pencil and their pencil sharpeners. I mean, this is a cruelty they just love to impose on Americans. But if you've got your own pencils and pencil sharpener, you don't have to put up with this. All right, as this goes. All right, bring a camera. Now, some people do just fine with their iPhone or their mobile phone or whatever. Maybe that works with them. I'm just a terrible photographer with my cell phone. So I always bring my camera with me to take pictures of things. Not just of things, but of pages from documents, things of this sort. This way I know I've got good copies, and of course it saves on the copy cost when you do that as well. And you don't have to wait in line by the copy machine or wait till they put some more toner in it or something of this sort. Okay, bring paper copies of your family tree. I know what it is to go all the way to Salt Lake City, Utah, planning to come find all these wonderful things on a line, and I didn't find diddly. But then I found all the answers on my Nicholson family. and my Hardwick family. All the answers were there for me, but I couldn't remember which ones. I just said, no problem. I just pull out my family tree and here I am. And of course, everybody has a genealogy computer program like Legacy or Roots Magic or whatever you use. But print out your family tree with all the information and take copies with you. Never take your only copy of anything with you on a trip. You need a fireproof, bomb-proof archive in your home with a combination of safe to it for the single items that you have. Okay, bring copies. Also bring paper copies of your family tree because the library you're visiting may have family vertical files, and you may want to stuff these in the vertical files so other people going through those files will find out about you and what you have and contact you. It's a wonderful query system. In fact, among the things you do when you visit a library is ask about their old paper card catalogs. Many libraries still have these, and they're wonderful because they often contained information that never made it into the electronic catalogs. Also, ask them about their vertical files. And in the vertical files, for example, the Alabama Department of Archives and History is famous for its vertical files, which go back decades and generations. Same thing with the McClung collection in Knoxville, with just tons of family information. Copy the title page of everything. If it's worth having, if it's worth knowing, copy the title page. I was a genealogical librarian for over 30 years. And I don't know how many times people have come to me saying, well, years ago I was here and I think I found this in a book in your library and I think the book was yellow. And I mean, I'm not the great Kreskin. I don't do mind tricks, although surprisingly, when they showed me the copy they made, I recognized where it came from, but not always. But anyway, and if you are ordering manuscript collections, always copy the pull slips. That is, and the Georgia Archives has the best pull slips in the whole world. They're wonderful. But photograph or run off a copy of the pull slips so you can put that with your copies and know exactly where you got your copies from, exactly where you got them from. And if you're taking handwritten notes or typing in notes, be sure to type in the date and the place where you're making the notes. So that does not become an issue either. All right. Also ask about genealogical and historical periodicals related to your the county where you're in. Of course, every state has a state historical journal, but there are a lot of local historical journals you probably have never heard of that have wonderful articles in them and can be all about your family. Also, of course, the genealogical journals are that way. There is online, free, a giant catalog to the contents of genealogical periodicals. It's called PERSI, Periodical Source Index, PERSI, and it's in your handout. But PERSI is wonderful. Although it is a few years out of date, it's a few years behind in putting together what they have. Now, if the local genealogical journals are not indexed, don't be dismayed. Just go through the table of contents for each issue. You can learn a lot and find a lot of valuable things from that. And of course, always go back to the query pages and see if somebody way back when was looking for your ancestor. Sometimes, even when yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. PERSI, PERSI. It's not. Well, I'm sorry about that. You can Google it, PERSI, and then Periodical Source Index, and that'll take you right to it. It's put out, by the way, by the Allen County Fort Wayne Public Library. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Let me go back. Okay. The two books are Guide to Genealogical Research at the National Archives, and the other is Guide to Federal Records in the National Archives of the United States. Yes, ma'am. Guide to Federal Records in the National Archives of the United States. Now, the second one is actually a giant catalog of the federal records that are open to the public. Like, for example, your great-grandfather was in the Works Projects Administration or the Civilian Conservation Corps. You want to know where those records are. This will tell you what records the National Archives has and whether they're across the street at the National Archives at Atlanta, or they're in Washington, or they're in Denver, or someplace like that. But it won't tell you how to do research. It just tells you what they've got and where it's being kept. The first book, Guide to Genealogical Research at the National Archives, it tells you how to research. And any genealogical library worth its salt has both sets of books. Okay, very welcome, very welcome. And the National Archives puts out a lot of other good books on its records and resources that are worth getting to know. All right. Now, if you bring your computer with you, or you're really good with your cell phone, and you can access and you keep your files and such on your, let's say you bring a laptop computer and you keep your files on your laptop computer, keep the files in a cloud program. Google has a cloud program. I use Dropbox, but it's always important to keep your files in a cloud program, because if something happens to your computer, the files are still in a server in Bulgaria somewhere, and you can access them again from any computer. And also, if you just find just what you need for your family history, but you don't have a computer with you, if you can access a computer with access to the internet, like my cell phone here, you can then go to Dropbox or your cloud, Google Cloud or whatever. You can go there and access your files right on the spot. But in fact, it's interesting to a pointless sidebar to that. The internet actually began as a cloud program, believe it or not. And it's still a good idea. Okay, always ask for advice from the librarians, even if they don't want you to. All right. Now, for George, we've been talking in general terms here. Most of what I've told you would be useful for anywhere, but let's go a little further than that. Let's go get a little more specific. Let's get Georgia specific. All right, first off, if you're going to do serious Georgia research, you need to get hold of a copy of Georgia Research, the second edition, which was published in 2011. Ted Brooke and I, Robert Davis, published it, wrote it, but all proceeds go to the Georgia Genealogical Society. You can buy a copy on Amazon. But Georgia Research, the second edition. Now, it does need to be updated. It's just, who has time for anything these days? But nonetheless, this will take you through the wonderful world of Georgia records on a county level, state level, federal level, whatever. And it will explain the complications and every trick that Ted and I know about Georgia research, we put into that book. And other people shared their thoughts and ideas too. It's a really good book for doing research, if I do say so myself. But it's also the kind of book where you can write notes in the margins, and you can stay up late with something good to drink all by yourself and on a late evening and work through it, making notes and putting little Post-its in it. That works. I do that myself all the time. All right, now, and it's also will give you more information on many of the libraries I'm talking about now. Okay, for almost all research, the best place to start is the Georgia Archives, formerly the Georgia Department of Archives and History, where you are right now. And they're offering a tour this afternoon. It's already booked up to show you around. You could spend an entire day showing everybody all the different tricks and sources for Georgia research here at the Georgia Archives. It's just a fabulous place. All right, now beyond the Georgia Archives, we've already talked about the National Archives at Atlanta, which is the federal archives for the Southern United States plus Kentucky. And it's most famous for its federal court records. Most of us are fortunate enough not to have had relatives in the federal court system. I'm not one of those fortunate people. But federal court records involving debt and committing federal crimes and such are wonderful. They also have what survives of the records of the inmates at the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary. Some of those records are missing. I don't care to get into that, but some of them are missing. But anyway, the staff is very helpful, including on the internet. They're very helpful there. And they do take queries. But as they say, to use the materials there, you have to make an appointment. You have to make an appointment. And again, that becomes more and more of an issue with libraries everywhere. Library staffs are being cut, library resources are being cut because everybody stays home and works on their computer instead of visiting the libraries. And so hours are getting more restricted and access is getting more restricted all the time. All right, now, the Atlanta area has many great libraries, and you'll find out about them in Georgia Research. The most important of these is the Keenan Research Center at the Atlanta History Center. But you need to check their catalogs for their materials, and you need to contact them ahead of time to make sure the materials will be there for you. They are open only by appointment. Now, the Keenan Research Center is also a great place to do research because if you have to bring relatives with you, they can visit the gardens, they can visit the museums, they can see the cyclorama, they can do all these wonderful, so great museums, great place for tourism while you're researching the family tree in the Keenan Research Center. But a great tourist place as well. And while I was raised right here, we are sitting where I used to play softball as a kid, my uncle's cow pasture. There's really nothing to see here. If I had to bring my family with me to do research at the Georgia Archives, I'd tell them to wait in the lobby until I was done. All right, now other libraries to speak of. Georgia's greatest genealogical library is the Washington Memorial Library in Macon, which is in Bibb County and should not be confused with Washington, Georgia, which is in Wilkes County, or Washington County, whose county seat is Sandersville. Okay, but the Washington Memorial Library, they are particularly great for Central Georgia. They're particularly great for Central Georgia, but they also specialize in the 13 original colonies, the states that were created from the 13 original states. They also specialize in Great Britain as well, and Alabama and certain other states that are Georgia friendly as far as research goes. But the Washington Memorial Library, a great place to do research. All right, now, as this goes, the greatest collection of Georgia private manuscript collections that has ever been or ever will be is the Hargret Rare Book and Manuscripts Library of the University of Georgia, and they are just super. This is about 90 miles from Atlanta in Athens, Georgia. Go Bulldogs. It covers all of Georgia, but it is particularly good for Athens, Clark County, and the surrounding counties. All right, now many regional and special Georgia libraries and archives also exist. The Georgia Historical Society has been collecting historical manuscripts longer than anybody else. They were Georgia's first specific archives for its manuscript collections. It's in beautiful Savannah. Again, you do research at the Georgia Historical Society and you send everybody else to see the Garden of Good and Evil or whatever. And I can't say enough great things about seeing Savannah, which is a bonus to doing the research. They also have the best food between New Orleans and New York, as that goes. Although I know there's some of you from Charleston who would say, maybe I need to bring in the boundaries a little bit on that. All right, anyway, be that as it may. Okay, there are other libraries that deserve special attention. Oh, by the way, the Georgia Historical Society is particularly good for Savannah, coastal Georgia, coastal South Carolina, and colonial Georgia along the Savannah River. Although it covers the whole state, it's more of a regional collection. As they say, the coast of Georgia and South Carolina, and the Savannah River Valley. Okay, some other great libraries. The Huxford Genealogical Society in Homerville. While you're doing research there, you can send everybody off into the Okefenokee Swamp, or at least to the state park. Homerville is not in the middle of nowhere, but it is in the same zip code. They have a spectacular library, a spectacular collection that was built to cover the families of Georgia from Macon southward. This is what Georgia calls its wiregrass. And what they build upon is Folks Huxford's monumental Pioneers of Wiregrass, which covers many of these families. And then they've added to that in their collections, their family folders, book collections, etc. The Augusta Genealogical Society's library covers 100 miles around Augusta, including South Carolina. Augusta is right on the Georgia-South Carolina border, so it's 100 miles in every direction from Augusta. They have fabulous manuscript collections, as well as a good library. The Odom Genealogical Library in Moultrie is a fascinating place to visit. It too is in the middle of nowhere, but be that as it may, the Odom Genealogical Library is the archive for more than 100 family associations. And with all this genealogical research that the family association members did over the years. So it's well worth getting, but get in touch with them first to make sure your family is included. And you may be pleasantly surprised and not even have known that your family has a family association and that you want to join and attend their reunions and things of this sort and find out all sorts of good information. Okay, the Ladson Library in Vidalia. There are three reasons somebody would stop in Vidalia, Georgia on their way to Savannah. And it's a detour even for that. One is the onions. One is the library. And for the life of me, I can't think of what the third one is, which is probably not important. Anyway, my late friend, John E. Ladson Jack, spent his entire meaningful life collecting genealogical information, and not just on his family, but on many others as well. And he was a wealthy man, and he bought a most eclectic genealogical library. There are books there you've never heard of and you've never seen before. I love that library because it's one of those libraries where I know whatever I go in there for, I'm going to come out with something, even if it's not what I went in there to find. But anyway, contact, like any library, contact them before you're going to make sure they're going to be open for you. But the Ladson Library in Vidalia, Georgia. Now, there are many other great local Georgia libraries, and I know some of you are just absolutely burning because I haven't mentioned your favorite library. The people who love the Cobb County Public Library in Marietta, they're almost on a cult level, so I don't want to upset them. Another great local library is the Crown Garden Archives in Dalton, Georgia, which is for Murray and Whitfield counties. It is first rate. Dahlonega, Georgia, has the Chestatee Regional Library, which has the research collections of several people who dearly loved Lumpkin County and the Georgia Gold Rush, and they compiled massive files on the families involved in both. And this is, like I said, you go to Dahlonega for a lot of reasons, but it's a fun place to visit. But you go to the library and you think, well, this is just going to be another rural library with a few books. No, it is spectacular. Even my little county in Pickens County, we are one of the smallest counties in Georgia in size. We were one of the smallest in population, and we had some of the smallest people by any definition you'd ever meet. I know they're all my family, but you visit our library every time there's an economic downturn. The legislature voted this money to build a new library so we could put people back to work. The last one is an exact replica of the Taj Mahal in India. It was a long recession. Anyway, they have a heritage room where all the county records are on microfilm, including some that are not here on microfilm. at the Georgia Archives. They have family folders, newspapers, all these wonderful things there that people have just brought in and donated to it. And I know because I created it. Okay, and that's just one library. Imagine what's waiting for you in the county where your family came from. All right, moving right along about these. Now, some Georgia counties have county archives, such as the Crown Garden Archives in Dalton. Burke and Troup and Upson counties, have county archives. And many counties have similar but smaller operations that are open only by appointment. Ask the public library in the county you're interested in if there are other archives, libraries, museums, whatever, where there might be information. Had somebody one time tell me they went to this little county somewhere and they worked at the library for a whole week. And finally, they're getting ready to go home. And they asked the librarian, is there anywhere else we can check? We've been to the courthouse, we've been here. What else is there? Well, you might check with the Historical Society. They're just across the street there in that old house. They may have something on your ancestor. They went across the street, they knocked on the door. They asked the sexton why they were there, what they were there for. And the sexton says, you do know this is his house. That's his portrait over the fireplace there with his sword. And they said, you have information on him. And she said, yeah, that's the building behind the house with the sign that says archives on it. Let me get the key, Now, this is particularly true in Mobile. And Mobile has an excellent genealogical library. It's an entire building devoted to this. And the people there treat you like family, and so much so that they will neglect to mention to you that Mobile has 4 other archives, and they keep a list there at the counter of all of them. And that doesn't even include the West Florida archives at the University of West Florida in Pensacola and this. And on top of all of that, you're telling the librarian, well, just a few little things here. My grandmother was Mardi Gras queen in 1946. The librarian says, well, then you'll want to visit the Mardi Gras Museum and Archives. Well, yeah. Oh, wow. Wonderful. Well, she was a nurse. Well, then you'll want to visit the Medical Museum and Archive here in Mobile. They have a house museum and archive for everything imaginable, except, well, I'm sure they've got one for miscreants too. Maybe it was an old jail or something. But anyway, Mobile, a great place to do research. But as this goes. All right. Anyway, and let me say a few special words about the Troup County Archives in LaGrange. Troup County Archives is very special. You wish everywhere had a Troup County Archive. It has many, but not all, the Troup County records, but they also gather material from all the surrounding counties, including neighboring Alabama, and all the books and such. It's just a spectacular place to research. And while you were there at the Troup County Archives, and they take in private manuscripts too, not just government records and family folders. The famous Callaway Foundation, Callaway Family Foundation of Georgia, their family associations papers are at the Troup County Archives, among many other wonderful things. But while you're there doing research, you can send everybody to Callaway Gardens, or you can send them to the little White House at nearby Warm Springs, or even to Andersonville, which I promise you they won't be kept there, even if they are Yankees. On that. Oh, and by the way, Georgia's national battlefield parks each have libraries and archives as well, if your research takes you to that. Okay, so as I say, many Georgia public libraries have special collections, and the Troup County Archives, as I say, is exceptional in all of that. All right, let me make a quick plea here, and I've already touched on this once, but let me say so again. Because we have so little time in this world of ours, and because we do so much of our research on computers, I remember just after, I've been around in this so long, I remember typewriters and card catalogs and have fond memories of all. But I remember the first time someone called me and said, "We're asking me where my library's material was online." And I said, we don't have anything online. You have to come here to use it. He said, "But I only use research online." "Well, I'm sorry, but we don't have anything online." He said, "Okay, fine. Where's your website?" "No, that's what I'm trying to explain. We don't have one." And we went round and round like this. And the poor old fellow finally figured out I was just a village idiot. And surely we do have all of our thousands of books and microfilms and such online. But libraries are seeing fewer and fewer people. This is the largest crowd I've spoken to in I can't remember how long. But certainly since the computer age really got up and going. Visit libraries and archives while they're still open. And by visiting them, you encourage them staying open. And if you have a chance to donate a few dollars to keep them up and going, like to the Friends of the Georgia Archives and such, be sure to consider that. Be sure to consider that. Also consider donating your materials to somewhere that will keep them. And of course, those get smaller and smaller as archives get fewer and fewer as well, libraries and archives. And at the very least, type up your information on your computer program, run off a copy with the sources in it, and then leave it at these libraries and archives for other people to find. But as I say, support your local library. And if you know somebody who matters, I'm like Rodney Dangerfield. I know absolutely no one who can do me any good. But if you know somebody who matters, be sure to stick it to them about the library and how much the library needs their support and their help. And this includes academic libraries at universities and colleges and such. Okay, before we take some questions and answers, one last story I'm going to tell you. And this story may not be true, or parts of it may not be true, but as George's famous Henry Grady said, if it's not true, it ought to be. There was a Georgia woman, a woman researcher. Her being a woman had nothing to do with this. But anyway, she was a researcher, and she did a very good job. She kept her material organized and well filed. But she was prepared to come to Georgia to do research on her family. And as she was going out the door, her father cried out to her, "When you're in Georgia, be sure to take a look at when I was on the jury that executed the King of Georgia." Now, in all the time she had interviewed him, he'd never mentioned this. Okay, she goes to the county. She makes friends with the county officials. In fact, by the end of the day, she's helping the clerk of court lock up the courthouse. They become such good buddies. It never pays to fight with county officials. They're there to help lawyers, not you. But anyway, and more patience and persistence and politeness, the more it drives them crazy and the more they're going to help you to get rid of you. But anyway, she's with him and she spent as much time as she needed. She got all the information that she needed. She's helping him lock up. And she said, "Oh, there's one more thing. My father said that he was on the jury that tried and executed the King of Georgia." And the clerk of court looked at her and funny, and he says, "Well, we ain't much on regicide here in Georgia since we ain't got a king. But we have sent one person to the electric chair. I keep the court case file on my desk. This is another reason to kiss up to the county officials. They know where the records are. I pull it out every now and then when things slow down and read from it. Let me get it for you." And he pulls it out of his desk, and it's like that thick. And she looks on the first page, and there's her father on the jury list. And she's reading through this, and it's the most fascinating story she's ever read. And she just writes a blank check to the clerk of court and says, "Could you Xerox this for me and send it to me?" And he said, "Oh, sure, no problem." And it comes in the mail. And she, for the next few years, works on this court case. She interviews all the senior members of the family. She spends a lot of time at the public library. In fact, she comes back to this county time and again to the public library to interview old timers who remembered the case. She at the county court, at the public library, she goes through the old newspapers and such. She goes to the University of Georgia to visit the Georgia Newspaper Project. And if she were around today, she'd be looking at historic Georgia newspapers, a free site online, historic Georgia newspapers, which has scanned all these Georgia newspapers for free. She pulls all this stuff together. and she writes a book about it. It's not a history of her family, but it's about, anyway, the book was an all-time bestseller, Murder in Coweta County. They made a made-for-TV movie with Johnny Cash and Andy Griffin out of it. And then she decided to write a second book about her hometown, but she couldn't get anybody to publish it because it wasn't sexy enough, unlike a murder. She finally got Mercer University Press to publish it, and it was called My Phoenix City. How anybody could say a history of Phoenix City, Alabama is not sexy enough. Talk about murder and crime. So what I'm trying to say is you find wonderful things in Georgia libraries. You find wonderful things in research. And the first advice ever given to me on genealogy, which was 50 years ago today, came from Kenneth H. Thomas Jr., my partner in many endeavors, who said that the wonderful thing about genealogy is it never comes to an end. There's always another generation to find. Had the husband of a distant Hardwick cousin of mine who was researching our family, and he said he had gotten the Hardwicks back to a Roman centurion in Yorkshire in 45. I said, you mean 45 CE? And he said, yes. And he wanted to know if there were any sources that could go further back. And I said, why? Is there a family story? Somebody was at the crucifixion? But anyway, it is a wonderful hobby. Libraries are spectacular. Let's keep the libraries going. But there is a warning to this. You may find out things you did not want to know, but that's okay. Criminals and crazy folks leave better records than normal people. It's the abnormal who leave the great records, as the great Lucian Lamar Knight, who founded this institution, pointed out. But also you will find the most incredible stories. And that's what you really get into it for, are the stories. And you will find them in libraries, and you never know when you're going to stumble into them. Another good resource in a public library, look for local histories and dissertations, and go through the bibliographies and footnotes for diaries and business records, things of this sort. Archives and always check in the catalogs, whether it's electronic catalog or it's a paper catalog. Check geographic location. Check geographic location. And the reason for that is archivists will catalog a manuscript collection under a geographic location, but not by the names of the people within that business ledger or that diary or those personal letters. So you go here to the Georgia Archives and you look up the 30th Georgia infantry that your ancestor served in. You don't find anything under your ancestor, but you find things under the 30th Georgia Infantry. You find letters, however, from that 30th Georgia Infantry that are just as good as if they were written by your ancestor, and maybe even some letters and diary entries that mention your ancestor. Well, guess who just came through the tent? And there. So like you say, look for military units, look for geographic locations for the records, and you may, in those records, find your ancestor. Now, let's have 6 minutes of quick questions. Yes, ma'am. Butte County? Yeah. I'm not sure if Butts County does or not. They have a very good public library. So check with the public library on that. I don't want to say that they don't, because then I go home, check the internet, and find out I was wrong. There's just so much of Georgia, not everybody knows everything. But Butts County has wonderful records. And there's a very early tax digest of Butts County that's been published either in the Georgia Genealogical Magazine or the Georgia Genealogical Society Quarterly. See here. Oh, here's the 5 Ps. Here are the 5 Ps. Yes, sir. So what? Oh, here they are. Oh. And so my history of renumbering lots. Do I know of a history of renumbering land lots, which I presume refers to the Georgia land lotteries? It was a history of renumbering them. Okay, he's asking me if the counties ever were engaged in renumbering the land lots. I've never heard of such a thing. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen. And I would come closer to believing somebody was paying taxes on one land lot, and then years later, when it was resurveyed, discovered the land was in another land lot, and that's why the numbers changed. Surveyors are human, and they have to do this work under terrible conditions sometimes, and some are better than others. So, particularly with the federal land system, we'll talk. Our next session is going to be on Georgia land grant records, but surveyors, even in Georgia's land lottery counties and in the federal land system, which looks like but is not the same thing as Georgia's land lottery system, mistakes happen all the time, and they're still being corrected even now. Every time somebody does a surveying, they discover that the line is off by a few feet one way or the other, or the wrong corner. But like I said, considering what the original surveyors had to put up with out here in the wilderness with wild animals and bandits and who knows what, I think they did a remarkably good job. But I've never known of them being renumbered, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. Uh, it would seem to me that if the land lots were going to be renumbered, that would require an act of the Georgia legislature. And so you might want to check the acts, which are very accessible here at the Georgia Archives in printed form, to see if that happened. Now, one odd thing is that were land lots that over the years were taken in and out of counties for various reasons. Like the owner of the land did not want to leave the county, so he got an act of the legislature. So there's a few little land lots off here to the side that are in the next county or something. Yes, ma'am.
Bob, you mentioned you mentioned that
Yes, ma'am.
one that I there's it's a thick, I don't know, it's called Black History, a guide to civilian, a guide to
Jimmy Walker did it. The lady is okay. I mentioned. Okay, I said it was by Jimmy Walker. I beg your pardon. It was by Miss Newman. Miss Newman did it, who recently retired, by the way, from the National Archives. But as I say, the National Archives has several good books on doing research. Well, no, it's put out by the federal government, and I think the whole book is actually online. If you go to, okay, well, anyway, the National Archives has published several good books. Miss Newman did a book, Civilian Records. I'm sorry, I'm not clear on the exact title, but it's Civilian Records for African or Black Research. Her last name was Newman. And go to the National Archives website to its publications. It'll stick out like a sore thumb. And it's a one issue. You're right, it is a wonderful book. I just wish that someone would do something similar to that on military records as well. But there's several other good books. There are books on Union records in the Civil War that include Black soldiers, Confederate records of the Civil War that include Black soldiers, Native American records, the guide to Black records relate a microfilm, National Archives microfilm. Just go to the National Archives website. There's a wonderful bibliography of all these books they sell. And some of them they sell across the street when you make your appointment to visit the library there. On what? On Hatthi Trust. Yes, Hathi Trust. That's one word. Hathi Trust. One word, and it's in the handout. But Hatthi Trust is first rate and 5-star. But it doesn't come. Some of the things in Hatthi Trust do not come up on Google, and some of them come up on Google that don't come up on Hatthi Trust, and I don't know why. But Hatthi Trust copies millions of books and pamphlets, and you can word search them instantly at the speed of light, and you can find all sorts of amazing things there on your ancestor that in publications you never had any idea existed. There was a question in the back, I believe. Yes, ma'am. Sir, ma'am.
It's Black History, a guide to
It's
civilian
called
records.
Black History, a guide to civilian records in the National Archives. And a copy of this book is here at this archive. They have.
Yes, ma'am, it sure is, as are the other National Archives books too. But don't check them out, keep them here for you.
On my other comment, the town, any, personal family history or public, all of that. Contact the genealogy center and they'll take it, they'll even pay for postage.
Yes, the Allen County Fort Wayne Public Library will take family information from you and books and things like that. They're happy to have it. Two things though, they don't have family folders. And another thing about them is they have the world's worst book catalog. So when you go up there, aside from checking their book catalog online, check the Library of Congress catalog or make a list of the books that you want to check. And when you're there, check by author and title, and instead of just the family. The LDS site, Family Search, their book catalog is superb. And the DAR Library of Washington, their book catalog is superb in that they list all the big families mentioned within a family history. Your Jones family is in Smith family history. It shows up in their catalog. Check those catalogs before you go to Fort Wayne. And if you find a book that you want, check it by author and title to see if Fort Wayne has it. Yes, ma'am.
If it happens to be a location or a reference point, I'm trying to locate plantations or even where they may have used to have been, if I said that properly. I have a problem trying to locate, they talk about a family and they lived on a plantation, and I'm trying to get reference points. Where was that plantation? Are there records?
Okay, the lady is asking about plantation. Okay, it was a national project many years ago to microfilm plantation records, but there were far more plantations and records that survived. Again, check with the public libraries, and there's a huge amount of stuff that's still in private hands, people's attics and families and whatever. Alex Haley had that experience in Roots when he actually contacted the family that owned his family. And a man named Ball published a book of Slaves in the Family, in which he took his family's plantation records and found the descendants of his family slave. And he knew more about their families than they did. And they now have a Ball family reunion for all the Ball families as they go. Now, for a specific plantation, first off, check the deed records of the county. With something like the Toombs plantation in Wilkes County, that's going to be a nightmare because there's thousands of acres and deeds that make no sense whatsoever. Okay, check the agriculture schedule for the 50, 60, 70, and 80 census. The agriculture schedule for the plantation, it'll tell you what that plantation was like for a year. And then check the slave schedule, and that will tell you statistically what the enslaved people were like. And that's for the 50, 60, and 50 and 60 federal census. 50 and 60, and the earlier census is also has for 50. There was a question here. Another question. Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering about tribes and African Americans that briefly enslaved. One of my, I was 13, and so I found out that there was like a tribe of Cherokee and Creek Indians also had the last name Baptiste within some of them, and then I spoke with some people like from some of the tribes, about how there weren't any Black Indians in that part of Georgia, but we were just trying to do some.
Okay, well, looking for more African Americans are more likely to have Native American ancestors than white people are. That's genetically proven. That's not hyperbole or something. And secondly, there were a lot of African Americans going back to the 1540s intermarrying with the Native American people here. And there's a lot of confusion, a lot of stories about that. Some of it probably more myth than fact. Some of it fact that is almost unbelievable. DNA is helping a lot here. There are books on particularly African American Cherokee relations. There are books on that. available. Check on WorldCat and Amazon for that. Now, the Cherokee, the 5 civilized tribes that were moved to Oklahoma, what became Oklahoma, their slaves were entitled to Native American benefits, just like the Native Americans were. And this has been very contentious, particularly among the Western Cherokee, who tried to cut that out, and the federal government has bluntly refused. That was part of the treaty. African enslaved people of the Cherokee were to be treated as full Cherokee. And as they say, great books are out on that. You had a question, sir?
I wanted more information on the Georgia Newspaper Project. Is that all the newspapers or?
The Georgia Newspaper Project sets out to microfilm all the Georgia newspapers they can lay their hands on. The more modern ones, they don't film yet or scan yet. Their archive is at the University of Georgia, the main library, the Dunlop Library, and it's fabulous. They have scanned many millions of pages from their newspapers onto the site, Historic Georgia Newspaper, which you can Google. And it's free and it's just out of this world. And they're doing more. And the more money they get, the more newspapers they scan. I want to thank you for being a wonderful audience, and I'll still be here for a while.